Good evening. My name is Chris Mamano. I am the president of ASI System Integration. ASI is a current service provider to the Department of Education for a number of computer products and services, and we were a participant in the recent bid process for the infrastructure and the networking that's being discussed relative to the award in front of the panel tonight for custom computer. We want to echo the comments and the sentiments of a number of the speakers, in particular the city councilwoman earlier this morning, or earlier this evening, I should say, it seemed like this morning, regarding the extreme price reduction that took place after the bid opening. We are very challenged to see how a 40% drop from a competitive bid can be accomplished without a substantive change in the scope. And we believe that if ASI, who was approximately $200 million less than custom computer in the original bid opening, was afforded, and the other responsible bidders were afforded the same opportunity and the same information to rebid this, that there'd be potential savings for the DOE, and that could take place with a firm that, from our understanding, is not on the watch list, the do not do business with from the SCI, from a letter to the Chancellor 4 years ago, recommended to not do business with custom computer. And we are imploring the panel to reconsider the vote this evening. We understand that there are timing issues, but we also understand that the other responsible bidders in this process have contracts in place with the DOE, with the City of New York, and we don't believe it would have to be a lengthy process to reset, to take the pause button, and to try to think this through a little bit more clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes.
Okay. So we'll now move on to the resolution. Madam Secretary, could you please note any recusals related to these contract items?
There are no recusals on any contract items being voted on this evening.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Please raise your hand if you vote to approve resolution regarding approval of contract items 1 through 10, 14 through 26, and 28.
You said 14 or 15?
Oh.
Oh, sorry. Then I need to correct what I read in the record.
Did you?
I said 13.
13.
No, I said 13. All right, so we'll quickly, everyone can put your hands down. I'm just going to correct the record. When I read the resolutions, I'm pretty sure I said 13. So I will self-correct now, and I will say that, strike that, and where I said 13, it should be 14 through 26.
13's been removed.
Okay.
No, we need to clear this up.
Yes.
It's 14 to 26.
14 to 26.
Okay.
That's to her.
Okay. The one and
I don't know, but I'm good.
okay. All right, so we're all in agreement. Again, first resolution contains contract items 1 through 10, 14 through 26 and 28. The second resolution contains contract items 11 and 12. Okay, now you can take questions.
Excuse me, I'd just
Yes.
like to say something. There may be some panel members that have some discussion that they would like to present to the floor about these contracts before we vote on them.
Sure. Yes. Please. Do panel members have questions regarding any of these contracts? Yeah.
No, just go ahead.
Go ahead.
For this one or for the next vote?
For all of them. We'll just do all of them, any of
Okay,
them.
I thought we would have conversation for the 11 and 12.
Yeah,
after.
well,
That's either way,
actually,
it's fine.
my comments are about 11 and 12. I really have to echo everything I've heard from the floor, from those that spoke about putting the pause button, hitting the pause button. I have to say, let's hit the stop button. I'm very concerned about this. I'm extremely concerned about this. This is a huge contract, and Mr. Ross, this is nothing new to you or your colleague. I've said this since I've heard about this. Some of the elected officials have even sent me threatening notes that they're going to sue about this. I think this is the wrong time to engage in this. I'm not saying it's the wrong There's not enough transparency surrounding this, and I understand the federal money that we should probably get, but I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater and voting for a contract that has nothing hinged off of it. You know, I've heard a lot about corruption with these guys. I think we should probably not vote on this tonight. Let's convene, have some deep dive discussions about this. What are we really trying to accomplish? What other vendors are out there that maybe we should be engaged with for this type of contract? It's a huge contract, and I don't want to see us vote on something today, not have a plan in place for where it's going to be used, how it's going to be used, and just spend money needlessly. I think that this is the wrong time to do it. Again, I don't want to lose the federal money either, but I think the federal money is applicable to anyone that's out there. The mere fact that they dropped it significantly, I'm trying to figure out, well, was it worth only $1.5 million to start?
So, if you'd like, Robert, if I may, let me address some of the key points that were raised just a short while ago. Some of these things I've discussed with the panel before, but I want to just set the record straight on a couple of things that are important. First off, one of the questions I've heard, and we heard this evening, was why didn't we negotiate with all of the companies that bid? And it's very important to understand that this was a competitive bid. This was not an RFP. If we had done a request for proposals, there is a negotiating process that's actually baked into the process of doing an RFP that allows you to negotiate with the various vendors that were engaged in the process. But when you do a bid, the expectation, the requirement is that the vendors offer their best up front, and the selection is made based on the bids that were received. That's precisely what we did. The people that evaluated, the technical committee, and the people who ultimately made the selection based on the bids that were received from Custom and the other companies. There's nowhere in the process was it possible. It would have violated our rules to have negotiated and reconsidered revised bids. It's not consistent with our process. It would not have been legal. So instead, we had to make a selection based on the bids that were received. Then, and only then, we did negotiate with Custom because we felt we could get better prices than were bid by Custom. And that's something that is, again, specifically referred to and provided within our rules that we can negotiate with the vendors. And I will assure you that when we negotiated with Custom, the reductions on the service side are based, you need to understand the structure of the bid, but it's all task-based. And Hal could describe the multitude of various tasks that are specifically laid out in the contract. We have different lower prices for those tasks that Custom will be performing. So just to finish on that point, they were selected as the best overall bid among all of the providers based on the initial prices that they offered, and our rules provided that we could only negotiate with them at that point. We followed our rules, and we followed our rules that were actually consistent with federal guidelines. So it's the process we chose, and it's the process that any vendors that were looking at the bid process and understood the bid process, and that was certainly explained to them, they would have known that was the way it had to be done. So I think that's an important thing to understand about the way this was. And the other, you want to talk about that? Go ahead.
With all due respect, I heard what you said, Mr. Ross, but you said you were taking the first best bid.
Correct.
If their first best bid was $225 million, then they came back and it was $127 million, then their first bid probably wasn't the best bid.
It was the best of the bids that we received, but we thought we could do better, and we negotiated and got better.
But was that floodgate open to all of the bidders?
Again, we could not, under our rules, have negotiated with the other vendors. Our rules required that we make a selection based on the bids that were received, and that's precisely what we did. Only then were we able to negotiate with the selected bidder. That is entirely consistent and prescribed by our rules. I'd be more than happy to show you how that's delineated in our rules.
But I understand.
I can read that.
I understand that, but then that means that the first bid that they gave us?
Sorry?
The first bid that they gave?
It was based on the first...
It was an overprice. Because if
Robert,
if they drop it,
I-
significantly,
if you're asking me if I think that the prices that
No,
we
I'm
had
not asking you
originally
that.
were good, we didn't. That's why we went and we negotiated with those firms. And so we were not satisfied with the prices that they bid up front, but even with that bid, combined with the other qualitative aspects of their proposal, it was felt that they offered the best bid. So we made the selection based on the best bid that we received up front, based on the pricing that they offered and the qualitative aspects of their proposal. And then, per our rules, we could only negotiate with the vendor that offered the best bid up front. That's the way a public bid works. So we were not able to negotiate with all of the companies. We could only negotiate with the one that was best. And I agree with you. Even though they were the best bid up front, we didn't think their pricing was good enough. And that's why we got significant price reductions on the various service tests that they're required to perform. So, and I just want to correct something else for the record. I carefully reread the old special commissioner's report on them. There was no recommendation that we not do business with Custom. And in fact, if you look, there are a broad multitude of government agencies, private companies, and public authorities that do business with them. To name a few: Springfield Public Schools, Estee Lauder, BOCES of Nassau, Nassau County, Town of Oyster Bay, Buffalo, Baltimore, and I'm just naming entities that have done new contracts with them since the report from the special commissioner came out. Many more have continuing contracts with them as well. So we're not alone in doing business with this company. They're a very substantial entity, and a lot of the problems that occurred, and we talked about this earlier, under the previous contract were also because the department's own contract management was not what it should be, and we've made significant changes in the way we manage contracts.
Yes, panel member Carmignani.
Is it possible to speak to the issue of the price reduction from, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but just how that could happen? Is there any of that we could talk through here?
Sure, and I don't know, Hal, if you want to talk somewhat more specifically to how they did that, but this was, if you look at the way the bid worked, they were bidding on a broad multitude of tasks that they're required to perform, and it was all the vendors bid on the same set of tasks. It's just, a bid blank is a blank. You fill in the costs for the different things that you're required to perform. We looked at their pricing on those things, and we compared with various metrics that we have, including prior contracts and like work that's been performed by the department, and we thought we could do better in pricing than was offered in the bid. And Hal can talk maybe about some of the...
I think one of the things to consider, and David mentioned this earlier, is that the original structure of the bid allowed vendors to bid borough by borough. So a small vendor could have been awarded a single borough. Vendors were allowed to bid on one or more boroughs. All of the vendors bid across the board in 5 boroughs. But when the vendors were structuring the bid, and again, as David mentioned, all the vendors were structuring the bid under the same rules with the same information. When the vendors were structuring the bid, of course, they didn't know if they would be awarded 1 borough, 2 boroughs, or all 5 boroughs. The award of 5 boroughs, when you think about some of the significant work that the vendor provides, for example, running network cable through a building like this, many different kinds of building, running network cable, the commodity supplies and the labor involved in running that cable is very expensive. However, if you're doing that on a larger scale, if you're doing that in 5 boroughs instead of 1 borough, and you can realize an economy of scale in terms of your labor cost and your commodity cost, you're then able to pass that cost on to us. So part of the savings realized was a renegotiation, which, as David pointed out too, is specifically allowed within our laws, within our rules. That negotiation, we were able to point out to Custom that there was, without a question, this commodity of scale, and we expected those savings to be passed to us and not to be held as revenue by custom. In addition, one of the major aspects of the bid was the quality of the equipment that was specified and required in the bid. This equipment is network routers, switches, firewalls. Again, this building, it's a large building. Operating a network in this building is complex. The equipment in it is complex. We required that equipment to be up to certain specification and grade. The vendors had to bid equipment that was at that specification and grade. Not all the vendors did that. Custom did. Once again, we were able to realize economy of scale with the bid. Custom, knowing that they're now potentially installing that equipment in schools across all the 5 boroughs, were able to renegotiate with their suppliers and again pass that savings on to us. It was only after the award and knowledge of the award were we able to renegotiate with Custom with that new term understood, or I should say, with that new scale understood. And that was a significant leverage for us in making that negotiation.
And I should say, I should add one, you don't know the bids that you're going to receive. You don't know the way things are going to work when you do things up front always. You've seen many facilities contracts where we've come to this panel, and this one was not different from that, where we break the city up into smaller pieces. One of the reasons we do that is to enhance the ability of small and minority and women-owned businesses to compete for these projects rather than just aggregating them as a whole. So we knew there was the possibility that the city would be awarded as a citywide, but we didn't want to have that a foregone conclusion up front. We wanted to at least create an environment where it was possible for smaller and minority and women-owned businesses to compete for this work. In many cases, you've seen we've been successful with contracts in getting a diversity of firms that compete. In this particular case, despite our having done that, it just didn't work out that way, but we at least started the process that way.
Thank you. Panel Member Zingman.
I have a couple of questions, and it's just really to be clear, as part of the reduction in costs that took place, or I guess was finalized over the weekend or by the Monday Contract Committee, in the RA, you were explaining why the selection of custom computer, CCS, I keep converting the name, the words, excuse me. The non-metallic raceways, the steel raceways, these were actually specific references to instances in bids of the losing bids and the reasons they did not meet your qualifications. In reducing the price, did you in any way compromise or change from steel raceways to non-metallic raceways or any flexible metal or any of those things? That is all still the same. The requirements of the original bid, they will still be as part of the reduction.
Absolutely not. The custom bid was not degraded in the negotiations. Their products that they were offering, the hardware they were offering, they're in partnership with Dell, were compliant. Where they didn't offer precisely what we asked for, they offered substitutes that are acceptable to the department. There was no degradation in their offer, right?
No, we didn't from the original bid. We didn't alter the supplies that they're bringing in or the equipment that we're bringing. What was altered was the price of that equipment and those supplies, and most specifically, the overall estimate of the price of the labor.
The other question is in terms of oversight, what's different since 2011?
A lot. I'm sorry. We took those findings from that report very seriously. I think one of the fundamental failings in the department at that time was we had contractors that were overseeing contracts on behalf of the department, and there was no established training or curriculum, standardized curriculum for DOE employees who were responsible for managing contracts. I think those were two fundamental failings of the department. We now have within every division, every department that has contracts at the DOE, which I think is everybody, there are lead contract officers that have oversight responsibility for all the contracts in their areas, and every contract has a contract manager that is associated with and responsible for that contract. In the case of this particular contract, it would be, there would be multiple individuals, but they're all DOE employees that will be managing the contract. We also established my office, working in concert with the lawyer, the department's legal department, established a training for contract managers and lead contract officers that is a full-day curriculum in what their responsibilities are in managing contracts. And as just part of the thing that we do, we bring in someone from the Special Commissioner's Office. One of the deputy commissioners comes in each time, and he speaks usually for about 45 minutes on what to look for in terms of evidence of corruption or foul play on contractors or others' part. We have lawyers come in and go in some detail about the various legal terms and conditions of our contracts and expectations of contracts. We go through how to review invoices and all of the things that you would hope that people should be familiar with when they manage contracts.
That the panel members got. The transparency issue, next steps. I should say that Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer is actually hosting a technology task force meeting on Friday, and I believe there'll be DOE representatives at that. I hope that that conversation really kicks off at that meeting, and we'll continue on there, but I'll invite my fellow panel members to weigh in if they want to. I'll circle in after if anybody wants to, since I've asked a couple of questions.
Any other panel members have questions? Panel Member Powell.
I'm sorry, guys. I have to go back to what I asked in the meeting. I'm very concerned about the second part of this contract. This is only part of it. We all know that. I was expecting to see some sort of analysis done where buildings were reviewed to find, excuse me, site surveys were done to find out what building needed conduit, which buildings needed special attention to get certain things done. Hold on.
We can provide
again,
that.
Electricity, because once this is installed and you're saying it's for internet use, the problem that we encounter when we go to schools, they have to have electricity upgraded, and then it's a matter of them getting the SCA money. It just doesn't come together enough for me. No one's connecting the dots. There's a rush to get this contract signed, to get the money. But, you know, if anything happens to us and someone has to pick up and work behind us, oh, they bought this. What did they use it for? No one knows. There's not enough information to connect the dots that says, we're going to get this for this, and then we need this to make it work. I was expecting, and when I said that, I thought maybe you would have said, okay, we're going to do some kind of, we're going to get you some kind of preliminary numbers that says, okay, to do the 5 boroughs, for the telephone systems need to be upgraded. Anything electronic that uses an internet connection, because now they're not using the old dial tone, they're using voice over IP. Which schools have the infrastructure that maybe they have the IPC phones that actually do allow for voice over IP? Maybe the technology's built into some of the newer schools. Some of the older schools has to go through that. The entire phone system has to be revamped to be connected to this. I was looking for something like that. That's why I say maybe we should stop or pause it, whichever one you want to do. But right now, it shouldn't be done.
So, in the plan that we sent out to the panel last night was a summary plan. It also included examples of the specific hardware that we install. But if you'd like, because we have it, if you'd like a building by building catalog of exactly the technology infrastructure in the building currently and the targets for the next upgrade there, we absolutely have that, and we can provide that. So
that would be great.
Yeah, because we've been engaged in an upgrade of the connections to the school, the fiber optic cables, which one of the public speakers mentioned, and we have connected fiber optic cable to all our buildings, which gets high bandwidth to the building's door. But many of our buildings now have aging network infrastructure that needs to be upgraded. Some of it's 6 and 7 years old. If you can imagine technology that's 6 and 7 years old, it's not delivering that high bandwidth network that's sitting at the door. It's not delivering it to the classroom. We know exactly which buildings, exactly which rooms that need the upgrades. We have it line by line, school by school, building by building, classroom by classroom, and we would happily provide it because I have a team that works hard on that, and they would love someone to take a look at it who's not on the technical staff.
And I think I want to add to that, just if I may, Robert, that when we approve this contract, and I still hope we will approve this contract, we're not committing ourselves to a list of 123 schools and excluding all of the other schools. So, you know, we can share that list with you. We can talk to you about that list, and if it needs to be changed, it can be changed. The contract just provides a vehicle for us to do this kind of work. So I think we need to separate the decisions around where the work gets specifically done from the ability to get the work done. And that's what we're looking for through the contract.
I fully understand that, but I don't think that was communicated out. That's where the transparency comes into play. It just looks like we got this contract, it's $1 billion. They dropped it from $1 billion, and you know, God knows why they dropped it, because there was no discussion about why the price dropped. And it looks like it could border manipulation. That's all I'll say.
Panama Power, I think there are talks that we will figure out and hopefully be working closer together. They've already been in the works, so I think there's opportunities for us to be even more involved. I know that Panama Member Dillingham had a question.
Just really a clarification of that a needs analysis was done by school. I understand there's a point person at every school, a tech person, so that prior to engaging in this type of contract that you did that needs analysis, and that is what then we will be working off towards actual implementation.
So we have in school network, we sort of refer to them as generations. Right now we have generation 1 through generation 7. Generation 7 is the latest and greatest. Generation 1 is about 6 or 7 years ago. Generation 1 is an older wireless standard, Wi-Fi standard. You don't have it in your homes because if you did, your new stuff wouldn't work. A lot of schools are using those standards. We know exactly what's in each building. The basic rule is the building with the oldest technology gets to the top of the queue. That's the basic rule. We need to equitably distribute the money. It's based on how old the infrastructure is in the building. That goes to the top of the queue for the refresh, and we keep working through the refresh. I think it's mentioned in some of the notes that we're looking at maximum 400 buildings a year that we would refresh, so that with our current set of buildings is approximately 3 years to reach all of the buildings. Not only do we have a needs assessment, and I mentioned this at the contracts committee, but we have day-by-day analysis, really moment-by-moment analysis. We have a network operations center. Even with some of the more rudimentary equipment we have in the schools, we're able to observe network and internet usage in every school. We know the devices that are connected, the types of devices. So we can give you really what we would say device-by-device level look at everything that's happening in the school. So part of the reason is that's because when things go wrong in the school, we need to fix them. We like to be proactive about that. When we observe things going wrong, we dispatch people out to fix the issues, hopefully before they have an impact. So we have a very deep understanding of what's in each school, and we keep that catalog electronically, which is why I can very easily offer it up. We have software and systems in place to manage all of that because of the scale and size of the network. So we do absolutely know what's in each school. We know how much bandwidth the schools are using compared to how much is available. We know the age of equipment in each school, and we know the types of devices that the schools are using. And we absolutely know, because we get calls all the time, that the principals want more bandwidth.
Okay. I know Panel Member Fruchter had a question.
What always surprises me about these decisions is the level of trust that's involved. To vote yes, we have to trust that you conducted the bidding, as you said, and that CCS was actually the most appropriate bidder. Then we have to trust that the CCS that actually colluded with Lanham is not the CCS that's now making the bid, and that there are a bunch of corrective actions that they've put in place. Then we have to trust that the DOE has actually put in place a range of contracting procedures that won't let this happen, that what happened with Lanham and them won't happen again. And finally, we have to trust that the reduction from 1.1 million to 620 some, 1.1 billion to 623,000 across the 5 years was conducted as you said it was conducted, and with all due process procedures according to the DOE's manual or whatever. That's a lot. It's a leap. I'm prepared to take that leap. But I want to say that we should not have been put in this position. This, to my mind, was the biggest contract since I've been on the PEP. That alone should have triggered a different procedure. Secondly, the bidding can look, or the, not the bidding, but the adjustment of the pricing can look really peculiar because it was so big. That should have triggered a different kind of process. But finally, we are dealing with a firm that not that long ago committed fraud. That should have triggered a different process. And yet what we were brought was something that was as if, oh, this is just another contract coming down. It's not that you didn't disclose, but the disclosure came very late and it didn't really give us any time to react and to respond in a way that would have made us feel more legitimate. I'm speaking for us, I should say me. Would have made me feel more legitimate as a panel member, right? So what I want to know is, what are you going to do in the future so that we're never faced with a situation like this again?
Okay.
Norman, on a very important level, I got to say I agree with you. This is not something that I take lightly. This is too late to be discussing this big a contract. I don't like the way this unraveled, and it's an odd confluence of circumstances that got us here, some of which we controlled, some of which we didn't. The unfortunate reality is the department has done a very poor job at leveraging E-rate dollars historically, and we engaged in a great deal of effort, assisted by Ernst & Young and working in concert with the feds to make sure that we built new procedures, new contracting procedures that would assure that we would be able to leverage E-rate money correctly and in a manner that was compliant with federal guidelines going forward. That was going on for quite some time. That effort included seeing that everyone in my office that touches an E-rate related contract got trained through this training program. Everybody in Hal's office got trained through this training program. Everybody in the law department that was going to touch an E-rate related contract went through this training program. Only then did we get ourselves to a place, and after we had discussions with the feds around where we were going to contract, were we in a place where we felt comfortable that we could move forward with this procurement. We were late when we started this, and we could have thrown up the white flag and given up on 2015 and done a pristine procurement that would have looked great to you in July, and we wouldn't have had this problem. But we didn't want to blow it, and I don't want to blow it still in terms of our ability to get the money that we can get to do work in the schools for next year. And let's face it, that's the cost if we don't get the contract approved tonight. the ability to get a federal reimbursement for about $25 million toward work that could be done in the 2015-2016 school year. We could still do the work, but we wouldn't get the federal reimbursement for it. I'm not happy doing this in front of you at this late hour. I don't usually do it with the contracts that we put in front of you. I don't like having you feel uncomfortable making a leap of faith. But the fact is, I'm sitting here in front of the microphone saying things very much on public record, not because I'm guessing or imagining things are right, but because we know things, and I'm sharing information that I'm confident is correct with you. And ultimately, we will, after this meeting, I know, have a lot of discussion and find a way to make sure that as we go to the panel in the future, we do it in a manner that is more transparent and makes information more available earlier to the public. And I know those discussions are going on, and we'll find a way to do that. But right now, we've got this very important contract that I appreciate your sentiment on that and your willingness to take a leap of faith, because I really don't want to see us unable to get this work done in the schools next year and leverage a lot of federal money to do it.
I just wanted to quickly say thank you, because I think there is, I actually personally feel that we have an opportunity here on this panel to have really robust conversations about our processes. And I think that the Chancellor and myself and the team have taken all of your concerns and always bring them back and think about how we can, structure our conversations, make sure that you get information timely, make sure that you guys feel comfortable with the proposals that we put in front of you, make sure that you get out to the schools. So I really hope that you know that we are committed to working with you to make sure that you are comfortable with the process when we're talking about contracts. And we look forward to having ongoing discussions with you. It's really important to us. And I really do, I'm grateful for the thoughtful questions that you guys raise every single meeting.
Thank you. Madam Member Zingman.
Do I
Last
just
question.
to be clear, because the one thing is E-rate certification, this is a certainty that you, with all the effort and the training and the writing of, we're being told really enticing numbers of rebates, so I want to know the reality of the.
Laura, I can't promise what I can't guarantee. What I will say is, and it's not much more than I've said already, we are now in a place where, after the past year's efforts, all of the lawyers who touch these contracts, all of my staff, including myself, Hal's staff, and himself, have all been trained in federal E-rate requirements. God willing, we've all done our homework, we've learned our lessons, and we will be effective in claiming that money. Everything we've done has been built around the notion that we want to make sure that we claim that money going forward. I think we've done it right.
Is there any
I
feedback?
expect we've done it right, but
is there any preview by those that, or any, you're obviously following procedures that they require, but
Absolutely.
Is there any, sort of pre-submission of the invoices for reimbursement there? They can give advisory.
I'm going to jump in.
Go ahead, Courtney.
I'm wearing my general counsel hat. Look, our fingers are crossed. We hope that.
This is a huge leap. Because this
we
is sort
hope
of
that everyone is pleased with our submission, and we have to wait. We have to be respectful of the process and of the federal review.
I do want to say that the real dilemma here is, on one hand, the principle of transparency, having just the contract blurb sit there for a week and me seeing the number, immediately requesting information. It doesn't come as quickly as I want. We find out things sometimes in the same time that other people are maybe starting to report about it. You don't want to comment until you're some of the follow-up questions. I read the RFB 85 pages and I researched steel raceway, since that was a key thing. I've learned more about this. So on one hand, there is the sort of transparency and timing and the sort of the public trust that this is a legitimate process. And On the other hand, I'm a firm believer in technology in schools. I say this as a parent of a kid who, when they were in middle school, was in a class of 38 kids for 3 years. There is a huge building crunch and space capacity. There's a huge need for more space. But in 2015, it's not either or. If the E-rate reimbursement is likely, and I guess it would be a shame to miss out on this. The fact that there is maybe some physical bandwidth service in some schools, I know. I'm in schools a lot. It is virtually non-existent in huge chunks of the school. If there's a laptop cart being used in one room, I mean, that's also electricity. You know, 2 rooms down, no one's getting any wireless, or no one can like use anything. And the electricity is separate from this contract. But while I'm not endorsing all uses of technology, online testing, there is a great potential for wise use of technology to really support students across all needs, and I don't want that to fail because of the real sort of failure on the part of not just the transparency, but the timing, the dilemma we felt in that, do we just release it without us even knowing, and do we then, you know, sort of compromise our ability to move the needle on future things because we did that. There were a lot of dilemmas that we all faced, and a lot of emails and strongly worded ones and frustration. This was an exhausting week in trying to figure out things. And even if I'm as a borough rep and I might be outnumbered at times, I want to know going in that I know what I'm voting for. When I agree with mayoral reps, I don't want people to think it's a rubber stamp. It's because I agree. And when I disagree, I want to know why I'm disagreeing. So I feel at this point, there are, as Norman said, there's a lot of acting on faith.
Yeah, but Laura...
but I feel that but it just was not just frustrating or beyond frustrating, it was really inappropriate. The timing, the lack of transparency. I feel more comfortable voting against, you know, popular consensus from the public if I have the information, if they've had the information, and I feel more comfortable disagreeing with people if I know they've had the time to digest it, too. So, and I want this to continue.
Okay. I think, first of all, there's no doubt that this PEP is different than all other PEPs. In terms of, you know, we were sitting down for Seder. Well, I'm just... But I'm just saying that we welcome discussion. We really do believe people have independent opinions and they should voice them. We welcome the questions. I think what Norm said is something I want to second, that sometimes, and maybe that shouldn't be, but if we take things on trust, I will tell you that I'm new to this kind of dialogue on this particular issue. This is not my area of expertise. But Hal sat down and kind of gave me a little mini course in terms of why this was really important. And this was months ago. This wasn't just now, in terms of why we were going in this direction, what it was going to cost us if we didn't do this in terms of the rates that we were going to have to pay. But most importantly, I visit a lot of schools too. And also, I've been talking to funders. And one of the things that many funders want to give us is the hardware. But what good is the hardware if we don't have all the other stuff that we need? And to me, my trust, if Norm is going to trust part of the process, I'm trusting David and Hal. Since Hal has become a much more visible member of our leadership team, he has not steered us wrong. And there's no company out there that's going to be 100% foolproof, because that's just the way things work. So I'd say hold our feet to the fire. We're making a big jump here. But again, like Laura, there's too much that the schools need that for us not to do this now would really, really be a shame. And to the degree that we are also able to leverage this with other funding that we're being promised by certain companies to give us the hardware, after one of the last meetings I had with one of them, I think it's a golden opportunity to put our kids in the future when right now they're just basically still struggling with the past. So.
That's right. Okay, comments, Member Baptiste?
Just very quickly, and I think the Chancellor actually put up a very good point. There are no guarantees in this life with regards to this. But I did want to see if we get a little bit of clarity in terms of, with respect to the contracting process, do we have certain provisions in place? Like, are there clawbacks in case they're, if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, or if something comes up that kind of alters the entire scenario where they're supposed to be performing? Do we have provisions in the contract with them as well?
Oh, absolutely we do. Our lawyers write contracts that provide us all kinds of opportunities to assure that vendors perform. I think the most important thing, Fred, is that our people now know what their responsibilities are, and that people know what's in the contract. And one of the things that I made sure was actually baked into the training that we provide our contract managers is a long discussion that takes people through the boilerplate, the typical language that is provided in the contract, because very often people have no idea what they're enforcing. They don't know what's in their own contract. Contracts are hundreds and hundreds of pages. So we make sure that people understand where to find those things are, what their opportunities are within the contract to enforce them. And my vendor relations officer also works with people if there are problems in vendor performance. So I think we will, not only do we write tight contracts, but we now have people who know how to enforce them.
Right. Panel Member Carmignani.
Just piggybacking off of something that Panel Member Zygmunt said, was voting for what we know. I know personally, professionally, I understand the technology side. I understand network routers and switches and so forth, but these things exist, unlike the technology that we're touching with our tablets and cell phones. It exists behind closed doors and telephone rooms and closets and so forth, and so it's hard for many to know what you're purchasing, and so that might mean more conversation, so that transparency actually comes down to everyone and to everyone in this process, particularly with these types of contracts, especially if now there's a company that there's some suspicion. So that's just something thinking about our process going forward.
Okay, and lastly, Panel Member Dillingham.
I think timing is always an issue, and what comes up over and over again is communication and actually how we can improve communication. So this is one example of it, but I have to say, I was at the contracts meeting the other night, and I rattled off about 6 questions to Hal and David right before the meeting, and there was absolutely no hesitation in the answers that they gave me, and they went into great depth, some of which we discussed this evening. So when we do talk about a leap of faith, I do think tonight is a reason to go that route. And for the future, all of that, all of that information that you shared at the contracts meeting would have been wonderful for the panel members to receive in advance.
Okay. Okay. So we will now move on to the vote, and there were no recusals. So please raise your hand if you vote to approve resolution regarding approval of contract items 1 through 10, 14 to 26, and 28.
(11 in favor), motion carries.
And the second resolution, please raise your hand if you vote to approve resolution regarding approval of contract items 11 and 12.
Mr. Powell, I can't see.
He's not.
I don't have my hand.
Got it. 10 in favor, motion carries.
Those opposed?
1 opposed, no abstentions.
Great. Okay. No one has anything else to say? So that actually concludes the voting portion and the meeting. Oh,
I'm sorry.
Oh, yes, Panel Member Cleveland.
Sorry, just wanted to jump in quickly. I noticed that only 12 CECs reported in, and I'm hoping that we can talk about this in a conversation. 12 CECs submitted their report about their activity, what they've been doing, and normally this list is much larger, And if we are voting parents into positions and engaging them and want to make sure that we keep that relationship going, and I know, Chancellor Farina, that you have been meeting with these CECs. This is not a reflection.
No, I understand.
Right, of what PEP members want to see. I want to see them involved and engaged. So we need to find out why they're not reporting in.
I have no idea.
Thank you so much,
All right.
everyone.
Okay,
Thank you. So the